Hello and welcome to Politalks. I'm your host, Jason Clark, and we're here with Ryan Lester. He's running for Toronto City Councillor in Toronto Centre, Ward 13. Hello, Ryan.
Hi there.
I just got a few questions for you. So the first question is, when did political activism begin, and how did you get started in politics? Like, what inspired you?
To me, politics should always be about community building, and I've been involved in that for a long time. I studied public administration and how governments really work at Ryerson University. And throughout my career, my focus has always been on helping people access their full potential. Working with organizations like EGAL Canada Human Rights Trust and the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, for example. When it comes to what inspires me, people do. Even all the way back when I was in high school, I can remember being drawn to councils and groups of people that were getting together to solve issues that were important to the community and to the school.
That's great. So why did you decide to run for the role of city councillor specifically?
Well, I've lived inside this new boundary, Ward 13, Toronto Centre, for more than a decade. I've seen how slow progress can be on tackling some of the really important issues in our neighborhood. Our streets have become less safe. It feels like in the last year especially, I've noticed a sharp increase in the number of shootings that I see on television, and they're right in this neighborhood. They're down the street where I live, at a church in Dundas, and I've really noticed that the city is facing a new crisis when it comes to opioids. And so I tried to take these issues to my current councillor, who's been in office for 8 years, and I didn't hear anything, and I wasn't seeing any progress. And so that motivated me really to get involved and see what I could do about it myself.
So what is the role of a city councillor, and what do you think you'll enjoy most about that job?
It's interesting you say that. My first city councillor that I ever met was Kyle Ray, and he held the position for many, many, many years. And he was the first openly gay city councillor in the city of Toronto. And when I moved to Toronto more than 10 years ago, I accepted a position with an organization called Community Living Toronto. And that really helped people who had intellectual disabilities and who were trying to reintegrate back into society from institutions, supporting their choices where they lived, learned, worked, and played. And after that role, I accepted a position at Pride Toronto. And Pride Toronto is really where I met the first city councillor. And I got to know exactly what the role was entailing and could see that there was a direct impact on how successful organizations were, on how people's daily lives could be impacted by decisions made by city councillors.
That's great. So you interest arose from you meeting people as you're doing work that was relevant to your career and things like that. So what do you feel are going to be some of the challenges you're going to face as a result of doing this type of job?
I think one of the main challenges is addressing some of the issues that are going to be left behind by the city councillor who's been in the role for the last 8 years. I think that the relationship between that councillor and the mayor needs mending. And the relationship between that councillor and organizations like the Toronto Police Service, emergency responders, and even residents. I feel like I have been talking to many people who ask me, where has this person been for the last 8 years? And so that will be job number one. It will be convincing everyone that there are actually a lot of people in Toronto Centre and in specifically this neighborhood in Regent Park that have been left behind and feel like they don't have a voice. And so that challenge of acknowledging that and providing that voice, I think is going to be a big task, but I'm up for it.
Okay, that's great. So you're providing a voice for the community. What are 3 of your most important successes in your previous career that you can bring with you to this table?
For sure. I think most of my work has involved working with all 3 levels of government. And so I know how to bring people together around a table and find some common ground to start. And you just build from there. I think one particular example that stands out in my memory is recently working with EGAL Canada Human Rights Trust, where I led the team to raise $10 million to build a homeless shelter for youth right around the corner, actually at Dundas Street and Pembroke. And so that involved bringing together builders like the Daniels Corporation, working with Toronto Community Housing and the private sector to pool resources, collaborate, and solve a problem in the community by bringing about 7 or 8 different stakeholder groups to the table.
That's great. So as your goal, you have some goals in mind, you've done some things in the past that can help the community. And so Premier Ford has made some decisions for our city, and they pertain directly to this upcoming election. How do you feel that those things will impact your job as a city councillor?
Well, first of all, they've impacted the campaign in a very big way. I mean, we had started out in 47 wards, then we went to 25. That decision was set aside and we were back to 47, and now we're back to 25. So it has been a lot of stopping and starting, and I'm sure that's been very confusing for people. Time will tell whether Premier Ford's decision to cut the size of council to 25 will achieve what he has set out for it to achieve. And I believe he thinks that it will result in more efficiency, faster decision making, and some cost savings. I'm certainly in favor of those outcomes, but I don't agree that it should have happened in the way that it did, especially in the middle of an election.
That's great. So what do you feel are the most important issues facing your constituents and the city as a whole?
For sure. When I've been knocking on doors for the last 4 months, whether it was in the 47 ward model or in the 25 ward model, people have been talking about the number one issue is safety. They don't feel safe the way that they used to on city streets, in parks, and in the places that they used to enjoy. And I think that that's the most challenging and the most complex issue. I think there's no one solution to solving the issue of safety in our community. Second to safety, people are telling me that getting around this city is getting harder and harder and harder. Transit is very important on people's minds. They're frustrated when they see traffic lanes closed to developers that seem to take forever to build condo after condo after condo. And that's the third thing, I think, having a place to live. It seems we're living in a construction site around the clock, 12 months of the year, yet no one can find a place to live. People are talking about choosing something because they've had to, or just being priced right out entirely, not being able to afford the rent, or when they're trying to save up money and buy their first home, they just can't do it.
Okay, that's great. So how do you feel your citizens can be involved or have their voices heard around these issues?
For sure. I mean, I've had many great conversations with people at the door, and they're coming with good ideas. They're very engaged, but they're very frustrated. They want to be feeling like they're heard. And for the last 8 years in the old Ward 27, which is where I live and where the councillor has been in office for 8 years, they just don't feel like they've had a voice. They've been promised a few different projects, and none of them have materialized. So I would say now is the time to find out who the candidates are and to contact them and make sure that their voices are heard and that you get a commitment from the person who you want to vote for on the issues that matter most to you.
That's great. So is there anything else you'd like to share with your constituents, as a upcoming election, get out there and vote? What would you like to say to them?
Absolutely. This has been such an amazing, humbling experience. I've known about the problems in our community for quite some time, and I've been working in the nonprofit space to help address them. But it goes back to City Hall a lot of the times. The people who are sitting on our council are really making the decisions that affect our daily lives in this city. This is an opportunity to really send a message. The time for politics is over. It's now time to make the streets of Toronto safe again and easier to move around in.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming to Politalks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Politalks on RP Television. I've been your host, Jason Clark, and we've been here with Ryan Lester, running for Toronto Centre in the upcoming election for Ward 13. Thank you and have a good night.